Okay. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Warrant Information Night for 2025. My name is Chuck Wooster. I'm your elected town and school district moderator to run these series of meetings for town meeting for 2025. This is the first of 4 meetings that we'll be holding as part of town meeting. The second one is going to be Budget and Candidates Night that people are probably familiar with. That's going to be on Monday, February 24th to talk about the budget and the candidates. Town meeting day itself is on Saturday, March 1st. So we'll be meeting up at the high school for our floor meeting of town meeting. And then the fourth part of town meeting is the Australian ballot voting itself, which is on Tuesday, March 4th this year. So those are the 4 meetings that we have as a group to go over issues for the town. The purpose of tonight's meeting, generally speaking, is to go over items of interest before the ballot gets printed. So when we next meet, the budget will have been set, the candidates will have been set. So this is a chance for our 2 boards and the citizens to come up with any ideas that they want to talk about before we get to the binding part of town meeting. So that's why we're here tonight. And we have a couple of items on the agenda for this evening. We're not voting this evening. The meeting is not being run by Robert's Rules of Order. The real goal here is to make sure that our elected officials have a chance to discuss what they want to discuss and get information out to the public, and for all of us to then have a chance to ask questions. So my goal this evening is to make sure we accomplish both of those tasks. So especially if you have a question and haven't had a chance to speak, definitely raise your hand, come up to the microphone, and we get a chance to hear from everybody. If you find yourself approaching the microphone for the 3rd and 4th time, then perhaps all you may be doing is reminding your neighbors that they've already heard from you. So I'd encourage you to come up to the microphone, make sure you get a chance to ask questions, but also be mindful that other people may want to be either asking questions or heading home. So that's the purpose of tonight's meeting. On the agenda this evening, there's 2 parts. We have a proposal from the Selectboard to enact a local options sales tax. I'm imagining most people are familiar with some of the details, but we'll hear from Kim on details about that. So we'll have Kim will have a chance to make her presentation, then we will all have a chance to ask questions of her. That whole process will take up to an hour, and then we'll get to the second question of the evening, which is how to disperse funds from the local option rooms, meal, and alcohol tax. And we have a proposal from some of the town staff on how those funds might be allocated by the voters at town meeting. So that's what we're up to this evening. It should be a couple hours to get through these 2 questions. We'll try to make it no more than that. And I think I've covered many of the details. For those of you who are in the room, there are some handouts in the back that have some of the details that we'll hear from Kim and others. These documents, I'm sure, are also available online and here at the town hall in the event that you don't get what you need this evening. So once again, this is our information night. It's really a chance to ask questions and hear details. So that's what we're up to. So without further ado, then I'll introduce Kim Souza, who's going to make the presentation about the local options sales tax.
Excellent. Thanks, Chuck. Excuse me. And first I'll say that our select board chair, Mike Hoyt, had planned on doing this presentation, but is not feeling well. And so it's left on me, but there are other board members in the room that I think will help support and answer questions, as well as the town manager. And thanks also to John, the town manager, and the rest of the staff that helped put together this little presentation. I'm planning to just essentially go through the slide deck that was provided and then work with any questions people have. That makes sense. I'm just getting a note about the link. So did John, that I'm still getting emails saying that the Zoom link is not the
same email. That's why I talked to Ellen just now.
Great.
Trying to redirect people from an erroneous link to a correct working link.
Okay. There are a couple people who have who are attending via Zoom that did manage to get the link. Okay, so then without further ado, I will share my screen and we'll just go through this little presentation. All right, there's our beautiful town hall.
With more snow.
More snow. That's probably about 0. Okay. Anyway, okay. I present very often in my get this stuff out of the way. Okay. The overview, first of all, I'll also say that I think it was in December that members of the select board did vote unanimously to put the question of the local option sales tax on the ballot in March. And ultimately, the decision on whether we implement this will be up to the voters. So this is not the select board imposing it, it's more recommending it for the voters to decide. And there is a plethora of information on the town website with all of the live links for different areas around what things are taxable and that kind of thing. As Chuck indicated, town meeting is, voting day is Tuesday, March 4th at the Hartford High School from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., which is when voters will be deciding on this factor. Super sorry for this clunkiness. I don't know where my this is okay. And then there will be further discussion, hopefully with the chair doing the presentation that time, on the town and school district meeting day, Saturday, March 1st at 10 a.m. at the Hartford High School Gymnasium. And these are, the slides are basically going to be just going through this overview of some questions that we'd received. So we're hoping to just answer generally here. Legislation, what is the legislation enabling Vermont municipalities to adopt a local option tax in this manner? And it's a 24 BSA. And the difference previous to this legislation, this is when a town had to do a charter change in order to potentially add a local option tax. And now the legislature has basically said, towns may do that without a charter change. There are still some limitations, but generally speaking, it's more flexible now than it had been. The current existing Vermont state sales tax is 6%. A 1% local option tax would make the total sales tax within Hartford 7%. And of course, one of the main differences between that is all 6% of the state tax goes to the state. And if we add that 1%, a portion of that, which we'll discuss later, comes back to the municipality for us to decide the uses of. How much could the town reasonably expect to collect annually from this tax? And based on the recent history of sales in Hartford, conservative estimates range from $600,000 to $1 million in basically additional revenue. These seats are open up here too, if anyone wants. What items are taxable? A local option tax, a sales tax applies only to sales of items that are subject to the existing Vermont sales tax. There is a significant list of exemptions for taxable items within the state of Vermont, which we'll also put later. Those, I think there's some handouts. There's a physical paper copy of some of those guidelines at the desk in the back and also available online. General guidelines, like so currently, obviously I won't go through all of these, but things like clothing and most food products are exempt from Vermont sales tax, period, from the 6%, and would also be exempt from that additional 1% local option tax if approved, as well as medical equipment and supplies. So this summary is available in multiple sources. Happy to go back to that if people have questions later about specific items. Would recreational cannabis sales be taxed? Basically, it would be treated just like any other taxable item within the town. So if you're buying a lawnmower in Hartford and we have the local option tax, it would be a 7% tax. If you're buying cannabis, I think there are additional state taxes, but basically the 1% would be applied to that. And that is the only way that a municipality can collect any tax revenues from cannabis dispensaries. How would the town government use the new revenue? The select board has adopted ballot article language dedicating all of the sales tax revenue to offset town municipal tax rates. Basically the article reads, shall the town assess a 1% tax on sales as allowed by Vermont law, with the proceeds of such sales tax being dedicated exclusively to offset town municipal property tax rates. If the town collects $750,000 annually from the tax, a property owner with a $250,000 home could see their property tax bill reduced by approximately $130. I think we're going to go through all the slides and then we can go back answering questions. Our online purchases subject to the local option sales tax. This is going to happen. When an item is purchased through an online retailer, let me just get a cough drop. It's heavy. Oh, I love the beat. Essentially, the answer is yes. Online purchases are subject to the local option tax. The state, excuse me, the state administers a program and collects the taxes. This is coming up later, but the state collects the taxes and remits 70% of it to the municipalities. 30% remains at the state level to be used for what's known as pilot or payment in lieu of taxes, which is used in municipalities across the state to pay for government buildings that are located in municipalities. That 30% funds are used, excuse me, to, sorry, I know this is painful. We'll get through it.
You need a spotter?
Only if you want to, but I think this cough drop is really helping. It's just, I'm talking too much.
You want a spotter?
Thank you, Lanny. I appreciate it very much. So some of that 30% that's retained by the state does come back to towns in the form of this payment in lieu of tax. Excuse me. How many other Vermont towns have adopted local option taxes? Approximately 32 Vermont municipalities, including Hartford, have adopted the tax for rooms and meals and alcohol. Approximately 26 Vermont towns, including Brattleboro and Woodstock, have adopted the local option sales tax. And there is access to a whole list of which Vermont municipalities have already done this. It does seem to be becoming a popular revenue source going forward. And why should we consider adopting a local option sales tax? Excuse me. It allows municipalities to generate additional revenue that is not tied to property taxes and that can be collected from non-residents. If approved at town meeting, when would the local option sales tax take effect? Approximately July 1st, 2025. There's a 90-day period which the state requires just to notify local businesses about the need to collect the tax and provide guidance on when to charge. Isn't the sales tax regressive? This is a question we've gotten. Yes, it does have a greater impact on lower income and fixed income residents. However, Vermont has had a sales tax since 1969, and many items are exempt from the state tax. These exemptions would also apply to the local option sales tax. Okay, questions, and I'll rely on my fellow board members to maybe help me. Yeah, so, okay.
Why don't we start here in the room? I think in order to be heard appropriately, you should step up to the microphone there to make sure that people at home can hear you. Is there anybody in the room that has a question or a comment that they want to start off with? Yes, sir. Approach the microphone and tell us your name and where in town you live. We'll leave it to you to decide.
Good evening. My name's Tim Ferriel. I live in White River Junction. And I just like to read through this as quickly as possible. So I said, while I certainly understand the rationale you are making as a select board to seek other revenue to offset the local property tax to run our town, I'm still troubled by this idea for alleviating the burden we all face. There are three aspects of this that I think form my objection to this approach. When taxes are derived from a source from afar, it tends to detach the rigor of restraint in setting a service level expense with the derived funds. We have always attached a value here in New England to frugality and local control. This seems to run counter to that grain. I appreciate the discipline that all towns go through to establish a palatable tax burden to voters to operate the town. Easy revenue from afar will weaken this practice. There is such a loss of effectiveness and efficiency of funding when it goes to some large central operation and then is distributed back out in some fashion. Education funding is a classic example that does not even achieve the original objective of the policy. In the case of the LOT, for every dollar you garner from taxable purchase, you're losing 30% of that to administrative overhead. If indeed you are capturing $1 million year to year, and that is applied to offset the property tax burden for each taxpayer, what does that represent versus the potential negative impact over time this may have on consumer choices day to day in the greater Upper Valley? My last back of the napkin calculation on this was an offset tax bill of around $100 to $150. And yet the community-wide impact on economic vitality and growth is not really known or understood by anyone. As an example, when I go to the White River Co-op and I buy groceries, yes, are not subject to the tax, but there are several non-grocery items. And if you ever look at your slip over here at the White River Co-op, you'll notice that. Why would a household decide to shop here versus in New Hampshire and be subject to a 7% tax on those goods? Finally, we understand all the tax impact? What about the car dealers up on the hill and all the auto parts that are sold as part of service? What other high volume commodities are sold in this town that provide critical jobs to our community? Auto parts, Brady, Allards, and deliveries like LaValle's delivering product to Vermont. So I just think that we should do some deeper thinking. I realize you're going to put this in front of the voters, but I myself am against it. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. I wonder so essentially your overarching question is, there isn't an overarching question you would like addressed. I mean, we have a representative from the Vermont Department of Taxes on Zoom, which could also chime in if you wanted to see if there were any reporting or statistics on like impacts of other towns that have, I don't know if they'd be able to answer something like that, but we could.
I just think philosophically it's the wrong way to go.
Okay, appreciate that.
Does anybody from the town or the board know about auto parts and car sales?
Automobiles are taxed differently. The local
Right.
option tax would not apply, but auto parts, it would be.
Another question, comment from the crowd. Anybody, please? Yes. Approach.
Very much.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. I actually thought about this. I thought about, if I bought a new Toyota, how would I feel about the taxing of the parts? And I came to the conclusion that, at least for me, it's much more convenient to go to White River Toyota than to drive down to Claremont to McGee's And it's obviously easier for me, both for the driving and for the concerns that I have and weather. I'm just saying this as a local person who's paying for these taxes, and you know, it's 1%. You know, when we use the word 7%, we think of 7% as a total, but this is in addition, and that 1%, as we have bandied back and forth here, is a penny on a dollar. And even if you bought a $25,000 car, which is hard to find these days, I still don't think, for me personally, I can only speak for myself, that the back and forth driving to try and find someone elsewhere to try and get away from this defeats the purpose. So last year, I didn't know how to feel about this. This year, I have been thoughtfully listening to all of my colleagues and people in town. And I still think, you know, it isn't the best way to go, but we don't have ideal situations right now. And I think that for a source of revenue, this is a much better source of revenue than resorting to user fees, where water, wastewater, sewer, parks and rec programs, if we try and use user fees to, you know, get our revenues up, I think that's more painful to the residents, whereas this is something, it's not just on the residents, it's on anybody that comes into our town. So it's an option that I feel more comfortable with than I did last year.
Thanks, Mary. Yes, next question.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My name is Eric Krause. I live in the town of Hartford. First, in listening to Mr. Ferriel, I realized that the math on one of the slides that you presented is for it assumes a $750,000 proceeds. For a range that's 600 to $1 million.
Right.
So the proceeds assumed are in excess of the range that you presented. It's a small nitpick, but you know.
I'm sorry, say that again.
When if the upper end of the range is $1 million, the town would only ever get 700,000 in proceeds if it's getting a 70-30 split. Right?
Yes.
I'm just saying, like the math on that, you know, you might want to pick more realistic numbers to work with.
Okay, so
it's a small nitpick, but I
can address that if you'd like. Just the other day, with the help of the State Department of Taxes, they introduced me to their online page, which contains statistics on the local option taxes. And it also lists current state sales tax receipts for every town in Vermont, right? I found the Hartford page, which designated the fact, or which described the fact that in Hartford, the state of Vermont collects something like $1.5 million annually on the sales tax. And if you take 70% of that, that would actually be a figure more like, if you took 1% of those taxes, you'd actually have a resulting recovery by the town of Vermont, town of Hartford, of $1.1 million. So in fact, the presentation is correct in that $600,000 to $1 million estimate as to what Hartford might collect through a local option sales tax is quite conservative.
No question about it. I'm not disputing that. I'm just saying, if you look at the range of 600,000 to $1 million, and if you assume the upper end $1 million, the town proceeds would only be 700,000. And the slide that talks about the tax rate decrease is 750,000 in the example, right? It's just basic, simple math. I don't want to belabor that point, but it's just it's a small inconsistency mathematically in your slides, and you know, we can quibble about the numbers or whatever, but that's not really why I come up to the
Yeah, point noted. Go ahead and get to your question. Yeah.
Sorry, I brought that up.
No worries.
So really what I want to talk about is, we're a Dillon's Law state, and the state gives municipalities a limited number of tools, and it's up to us to decide whether the tool is correct or not. And that's really the exercise here. And it turns out that this seems like on a typical year for my household, this is a good tool. This will probably make my taxes go down. In the short term, this is a good tool for my household. And I say short term because if we look at the longer term picture, the waters are not quite so clear. And that's where I have concerns. And I don't think the town has done yet proper analysis to answer some of those questions. The longer term impacts of economic inequity impact all of us. And with that as the context, I have a couple slides for you as well. Sales and excise tax. These slides are from itap.org, which is the Institute for Taxation and Economic Policy. They claim to be a nonpartisan. They claim to be nonpartisan and a nonprofit organization. Easy to find it online, itap.org. And just in their search box, type in who pays. And they have 7 editions of the report. This is from the 7th edition report. It uses the data, 2024 tax law data from Vermont and 2023 income levels and income data from Vermont. So this isn't Hartford specific. Hartford actually has a medium income that's a little higher. So this doesn't quite represent us, but the bottom quintile by share of income is paying the most. And that's what we mean by regressive tax. The very top 1% is essentially getting a free ride here. Another thing that's been pointed out in past meetings is that property taxes are actually progressive. And this is from the same website. And this is true because there's a cap, an income-based cap. For low-income Vermonters, they get a cap, their property taxes are capped, and the state provides a credit for the balance of that. An example for a family in the second income quintile, and I just arbitrarily picked $43,000 as an income. If you use, and I hope the people that are online representing the tax department can comment on any of my comments here, but if you use $43,000 as an income and you use the 2025 property tax credit calculator, which is a spreadsheet, put in $43,000 there. It doesn't actually matter what the value of the home is. What you find is that the property tax that family would be subject to is capped at $1,290. If we arbitrarily, again, decide that this particular family has a property worth $150,000, with the current tax rates, they would have a tax liability, municipal side only. This is what I'm only talking about, municipal side, of $1,740, give or take a little bit. It's back of the napkin math. So the state picks up about $450 of that. So in order to get to the point where that family sees any benefit from a sales tax, the tax rate has to get down to about 85 or 86 cents. And now it's at what, about 14 per 100, I think. So there has to be a pretty significant decrease in the tax rate because that family's capped. They're only going to pay up to $1,290 at current, in the 2025 spreadsheet. Those numbers are subject to change, I'm sure. But so they're paying a 1%. They're paying on the sales tax side, but they're not benefiting on the property tax side. And that's where I have concerns. And I don't think that we've done as a town, that we've done proper analysis on this to be able to understand and answer how this would apply to different demographics. So it's again, these are arbitrary numbers. I just picked the second quintile with a $43,000 family income and $150,000 property. How many of those exist in the town of Hartford, I don't know. And that's, the state obviously has the the property data and they have the income data. And I think they could probably help make some sense of this. And then there's other questions about rental credits and so on. So if you look at all the slices of the demographic, whether we take the income and break it into 5 quintiles, and then you look at also renters, and you look at people that don't own property in Hartford, I think we would do ourselves a benefit in the long term by doing a much more detailed analysis, and particularly an income-based analysis.
Thanks, Eric.
If anything I shared doesn't make any sense, it's my fault, not the data. So I'm happy to hear you take any questions on my comments.
I'd like to maybe, Eric, I want to make sure we have a chance for other people to
Sure.
make comments, but why don't you, we can come back around if someone has a question for you. Yeah, we'll hold that. Other questions and comments from people in the room at this point? If so, please approach the microphone and tell us your name and.
Can I add something, Chuck?
Yeah.
Just that also, because we do have this representative and attorney from the Vermont Department of Taxes. So if anyone has a question specifically to them, they can respond to that as well. Just
Can they verify that information?
if you want to ask that.
Just where they can verify information was presented.
How about like Eric, if you have could you pose your question? Sorry, I know I'm not the moderator here. I just wanted to make sure people knew that was available.
I think if one of them is on the Zoom and wishes to comment, to speak to what Eric has said, that'd be great.
Sharon, would you care to comment on the last residents' observations?
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, now I don't have any, I don't really have any input on the property tax issue.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so not to debate the methods.
Sure. Yeah, we have another. Good. Exercise is good.
Yeah. Good evening. My name is Paul Sunday. I live in Wilder. First, thanks to our elected officials. It's not an easy job, and really appreciate what you're doing. Clearly, this is not an easy issue, and I've been trying to gather as much information as I can. One of the things that was new to me tonight was the online sales, which I hadn't thought about that. And to your point, for the state person, do we have data on the proportion, like how much is coming from online versus how much is coming from on the ground? Because I've thought about this tax as something where we can potentially gather revenue from folks who aren't residents. That online stuff is all residents. So I'm just curious about that, if there's any data on that. Thank you.
Anybody happen to know?
Sharon, would you know the answer to that proportionally, about approximately how much of the sales tax revenue is derived from online sales versus brick and mortar sales?
As far as the data, if the question is about the data that's posted on the website for the town of Hartford, that does not include online sales. That is only data, the data that's posted is only for the brick and mortar locations in the town.
So we could potentially, so you're saying that the number the town manager suggested earlier, the 1.1 million, is only including in-person or brick and mortar sales?
Yes, we do not get data from e-commerce vendors by town unless the town has actually elected local option tax.
Okay, so in theory, it could be more than that.
I guess, the short answer, Paul, is we don't seem to have that number in hand. Yep. Yes.
Just point of order.
Yep.
I tried to get on the website, the Zoom call, and that's why I was late, because all I get is this message saying that the Hartford School Board is so it won't let me on. the Zoom call.
We've been working on correcting that, Dylan.
So it is not working.
It's been corrected. If you hit that link,
did
it
it.
should bring you.
I just did it 1 minute ago.
There's several people on Zoom now,
Okay,
so
so-
it's
But
working.
I did it through the Hartford, click the link information meeting, and there's the Zoom link, and I clicked on it, and I get
Okay, hopefully it's me.
Dylan, do you have any
Great. Thanks,
suggestions
Linda.
for Zoom people as to how to access the meeting?
Send her warrant information. Correct on that 1 second that I have, because I can't speak for anyone.
And I was able to log on through the town website
That's
page,
where I was going. I went through the town website.
to the government page and then
When I
select.
went to the very top, it says click on this link for tonight's meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
Check when you government select board, link to Zoom.
Okay.
It's a banner, I'll change it.
Okay, great. That's,
Thanks,
thanks,
Dylan.
Linda. Yeah. Okay, yes, sir. Please introduce yourself. Tell us where you live.
Good evening, thank you. Jonathan Rugg, Hartford Village. I reluctantly come to the microphone reluctantly because I am a Northern New Englander and I am not prone to oration. This has got me, you might say this has my panties in a bunch, this issue. I spoke out against it last year and it seems like rinse and repeat this year. I understand that the state changed the regulation that required us to put this into the charter, and so it's a little easier to run it up the flagpole, as it were. But I'm against this for several reasons, not the least of which is as a businessman, as an engineer with their own practice, I brought money into the Upper Valley from afar. And I would hate to do anything that impedes entrepreneurism. We need a tax base in Hartford, and this just makes it 1% more or 1/6 harder for someone to do business in Hartford. I think we've just written retail off on the Vermont side, and I think that's unfortunate because we do have retail establishments. We have CED or GED, the electric supply house up here on Taft's Flats. We have, geez, we used to have an Aubuchon Hardware. I loved having Aubuchon Hardware right here in town when I needed something on a Sunday afternoon and I didn't have to go to West Leb. Now I got to go up to Dan and Witt's. And so I just don't want to do anything that impedes entrepreneurship. And I think we have a revenue problem, and I'm not sure this is the way to solve it. I also spoke out in the past about a desire for Hartford to realize some of the windfall from the cannabis sales. And unfortunately, and I do understand that our legislature made that impossible for us. And I think that's a problem for our legislature to address. And I'm at wit's end. I've been preaching, somebody do something, get the legislature to let us put a local options tax on cannabis. We are at the interchange of 2 interstate highways. We have tourist traffic, and the cannabis is still illegal across the border in New Hampshire. So we've got people coming from New Hampshire to buy their cannabis while we go over there to buy the liquor. On a rest area in 89 off 93 for crying out loud. So where was I going with? Just that I really think the town, everybody in this room, we all need to pull together and get the legislature to get their act together and let us tax the cannabis and share in that windfall. They're getting 14 or 15%. We can't get 1%. Give me a freaking break here. Okay, I'm done. That's my oration for the night. But gosh, Willikers, we can do better. I don't think that taxing everything 1% is the answer. Yes, I want to see a tax on cannabis, and when we're behind the curve, because by the time we get around to it, it will be legal over there. Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. Pretty good for a Northern New Englander.
Okay.
Yes, please introduce yourself. Tell us where in town you live.
Hi, my name's Kathy Melisick. I'm from Wilder, the first planned worker community in all of Vermont. To Mr. Sunday's question about sales tax revenue that comes from online sales. In 2020, which we know was COVID times, between March and September, Vermont collected apparently about 10% of the state's sales tax revenues from online sales. It was around $27 million. And that was up from $13 million, which was in 2019 pre-COVID. I think we're in a pinch here. I'm not saying yay or nay, but I think we're in a pinch as one of the river towns where everybody goes across the river to buy their stuff. You know, I had someone stop me in downtown White River once and ask me where he could buy shoes for his daughter who was in the car with him. And I was like, see that bridge? You know? So I appreciate the fact that you all are working toward this. Since cannabis was legalized, I've asked at meetings, can we get a tax on cannabis sales? Seeing the amount of revenue that's been brought in other states where it's been legalized. I do agree with Mr. Rugg. It's unfortunate that we can't do just cannabis. We can't just select items to be taxed. That said, the idea that our property taxes could go down a bit from this would be great. And I also assume that everybody in this room who pays Vermont taxes make sure to actually list the high ticket items that they've bought that they owe tax on when they do their taxes. Pause, ... or does the automatic calculation for it. And that's it. I appreciate your work on this. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. Yeah.
I may add just a couple more observations. Another consideration in my own research was that, for example, with the presentation we're going to have from the departments requesting vehicles to be paid with our existing rooms and meals and alcohol tax, local option tax. If we were to take out loans for those vehicles or lease them as opposed to using the local option taxes, we would be paying something along the lines of $50,000 additional in interest. If we have something, if we do collect 700,000 or whatever in local option sales tax, and if we choose to use funds like to purchase another capital equipment like a fire engine or something like that, if we were to bond or loan for that fire engine, we would probably be paying upwards of $150,000 to $200,000 in interest. So I guess my point is that I think there's even more value to leverage there in terms of it would be not only the reducing the tax burden by 700,000 or more, but it would also not be incurring interest and increasing the debt on capital purchases that could be bought with those funds. I think I mentioned this when we discussed it last year, that Brattleboro, also being a border town on the New Hampshire border, did 3 attempts to pass their local option tax. And it's not uncommon, I think, in some towns to bring this back up again, the rinse and repeat, as you say. And on the 3rd time, the voters did pass it. And it was at that point that the Brattleboro Councilor Select Board did limit it to say it would be used to offset the tax rate. So that it basically was not going to be used to, buy a roller coaster or whatever, it was literally dedicated to offsetting the operating budget, which is what the Select Board is also advocating for in this case to the voters to decide.
Just to clarify that, Kim, is that how it's going to be on the ballot? Like, do you have the wording?
Yes.
You have the wording for the?
Yep, and that was in part of the presentation. So basically, shall the town assess a 1% tax on sales as allowed by Vermont law, with the proceeds of such sales being dedicated exclusively to offset town municipal property tax rates. So it's not, I mean, we have struggled. I think there's been a lot of perspectives, observations saying that we need to reduce spending. And we spent a lot of time looking at the fiscal 26 budget and working through it and working with staff, and staff made a lot of sacrifices and the board had to make some really hard decisions. So we were not on autopilot. We didn't just automatically approve things. We have 4% increase in salaries, some of that determined by union contracts, 11% increase in health insurance. So there are few things that, not few things, there are a lot of things that we don't have a lot of control. What a gallon of gas or a gallon of milk was 10, 20, 30 years ago, the rate of inflation, we're not immune to that as a municipality and the expenses that we have to pay. And so seeking alternative sources of revenue is one part of the equation. It's yes, and yes, we want a conservative, fiscally responsible budget. And we also want to look at the most, just the best sources of revenue that we can find. This may not be perfect.
Thanks, Kim. Yeah. You have a quick follow-up, Kathy?
Yes, I am so sorry. I forgot to ask one of my main questions was, we have a rooms and meals tax that's separate from this in Hartford, right?
Yes.
Do short-term rentals pay taxes toward that?
I would love to answer that if I may. So I'm currently in the middle of a very kind of wild goose chase with Airbnb and so the answer is yes. We should be getting from like places like Vrbo, Airbnb, those kind of short-term rental. There is absolutely no way to officially confirm that, including because of confidentiality provisions within the state. They can't tell us exactly how much we're getting from.
But if we were to enact something in the town for a short-term rental registration program or
It's
something,
already part of the rooms. It's already part of the local option rooms tax.
that
We
short-term
collected
rentals.
already.
Oh, okay, got
Yeah.
it. But I mean,
I
I
just
don't
can't
have an
prove that
official
we-
registration for people who are doing Airbnb or Vrbo's, right?
Official registration, what?
In the town. is
Do
the
we know in the
rental
town of Hartford
registry.
who's renting out?
There's not a rental registration of any
Okay.
kind. And here's the back and forth. I have a number of exchanges that I've shared with the town manager and the chair with my exchanges with Airbnb and the Vermont Department of Taxes. And maybe Sharon could address this as well. Like if there is any possible way to document that we are in fact being the local option tax, rooms and meals tax, 1% is already being collected and remitted by Airbnb. Sharon, is there any way you could speak to that?
Unfortunately, due to confidentiality restrictions, I can't speak to any particular cases, but short-term rental platforms are subject to the local option meals and rooms tax. And the department does actually actively reach out to them and let them know about that.
Thank you, but
Correct.
Hartford does not have a registration system.
Correct.
Correct. Thank
And
you.
also
Thanks, Kathy.
on the Airbnb website where it talks about Vermont local taxes, it lists a number of municipalities that have a 1% local option rooms and meals tax, and Hartford is not included on that. So I'm basically, it's still a rabbit hole that I'm still going down and will continue to until I get through it.
Yes, well, we have please, sir, want to approach the microphone because we can't hear
I
you.
just want to make one quick correction to what Kim had to say about using the Brattleboro model.
Okay.
Brattleboro has a multi-state border, and I should also remind.
Sir, it'd be great if you come to the microphone because people at home can't hear you. Yeah.
With a voice like mine, it should be hard to hear.
So tell us your name.
Vermont. Pete Zandron, White River Junction, just got a place right across from the VA, no missing it with the big flag in the window. Now, Kim, gotta remind you, but Brattleboro does not just have a border with one state, it has a 2-state border, which you forgot to mention, and they're also struggling with some of the same problems that I've had to email some of your colleagues about recently during a fact-finding trip just a few days ago.
Brattleboro does not border Massachusetts.
No, actually it does.
Vernon borders Massachusetts.
He's right. Brattleboro's not.
Actually, it is, and they get quite a bit of traffic from Mass.
They do,
We're
sure.
close.
And
It's close.
part of it, like I said, at the end, they are having some of the same interstate traffic problems. And quite a bit of interstate commerce coming up from that way as well.
Thanks, Pete. Jonathan, before anybody else has anybody not had a chance to speak yet? Who wishes to come to the microphone? Okay, let's keep going. Jonathan, back to
I
you.
just wanted to point out the obvious irony of being able to have a 1% tax on liquor but not on what is still a Schedule I drug, cannabis. And I wonder if the tax professional online could answer, what does the town of Hartford get for having opted into cannabis sales out of the 14 or 15% that the state takes in tax? Do we see any remissions from that?
Sharon, do you want to answer that? Go ahead, Will.
Hi there, this is Will Baker, attorney at the tax department. I'm not exactly sure what the question was, but the excise tax on cannabis is a statewide tax. To directly tax cannabis, you need the local option tax.
Does any of the Vermont state tax on cannabis go back to the towns that have dispensaries, that voted to have dispensaries and are collecting the tax?
It goes to the statewide budget, of course. But
Okay,
if
so-
your question is there a specific direct tax that the towns collect from
No,
cannabis?
the question, early on, we were told that some of the money was going to come back to us if we allowed, or potentially come back to us, 7%, 3%, 2%. From what I'm hearing is, it all goes to Montpelier, none comes back to Hartford.
Well, yeah, maybe he's saying I think it goes into the general fund, so to speak, but does not come back to the hosting towns. Yeah. Other questions or comments?
But I see a problem there.
I did invite 2 of our legislators to be here tonight and they could not.
Okay, Kim.
That's unfortunate, but I have had a conversation with Esme about this.
Great. Okay. Is there anybody online who has a question?
So there are no hands up at the moment. Want to give people.
If people are online, so we've got another about 20 minutes potentially to continue on this topic. I want to make sure if people haven't had a chance to be heard that they have a chance to. So if you're online and thinking about it, go ahead and raise your hand. And meanwhile, Tim, you want to take another crack at it?
Sure. I know it's like to be online, so sorry if I'm budging in from you online people. The other thing that I shared with the select board a couple of months ago is this concept of Hartford, and I'm not in any way suggesting that the fine people that run this town are spending too much money, but I'm just really struck by the if you recall the rates, our municipal rate in the town of Hartford relative to our other peers is still strikingly to me so high. So if you take the sheet that I gave you a month or so ago that had a list of the municipal rates of, let's pick an example, Colchester, Rutland, Brattleboro, you can kind of pick a peer group, if you will, around Hartford, because it's not really fair to pick Stowe or something of that nature. Why in Hartford, with the growth that we've had, this car dealerships that have showed up here, the housing that is beginning to show up here, why is our rate so high? I just do not understand it. And I would love to have someone research it and understand it. I'm not suggesting we spend too much money, but there's got to be something with our tax assessments or something in this town that makes it unusually high relative to our peers across the state. And the only other comment I wanted to make is, again, kind of this reiteration of this idea of taxes. When we make decisions as a municipality on what we need, I'm kind of perplexed by the idea of why someone purchasing something would absorb that burden. To me, it's kind of like, we run a town, we think this is what we need to run our town, and the property taxes on the municipal side are a direct reflection of that. And it just seems odd to me to take a tax and sort of detach that relationship between what you need locally to run your town and what you're going to spend locally to run that town. And once you start doing these other nefarious tax sources, it just becomes a little more muddy. And I'm not in favor of that.
Thanks, Tim. You have a question online?
So Will Baker has his hand up again, and then I'll get to you next, Mike.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the auto purchase issue that was brought up at the very beginning of the meeting. Just want
do introduce yourself and tell us where you live.
This is Will Baker, attorney for the Vermont Tax Department.
Great, thanks.
I just wanted to clarify the purchase automobile purchase issue. If you purchase a car in the state of Vermont, or you register a car in the state of Vermont, that you pay the purchase and use tax, which is completely different than the sales tax. So it has nothing to do with sales tax, and there's no implication for any local option tax. No matter where you buy the car, whatever town it is, even if you buy it in New Hampshire, if you're registering it in Vermont, you still pay the Vermont purchase and use tax. So that has nothing to do with local option tax. What does have to do with the local option tax is retail sales. So if there's an auto repair shop in a town in Vermont that has a local option tax, if you have a brake job done and you purchase brake pads, they're going to itemize the brake pads and charge you sales tax and charge you for labor, and the labor is not taxed. And so if you're in a local option tax town, then you would pay a 7% tax rate on the brake pads. And in any other town in Vermont, you pay the 6% sales tax on the brake pads. But that's only for car parts, not car purchases.
Great, thanks, Will. Another one online?
Yep, go ahead, Mike Morris.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, Mike Morris, Hartford, Vermont. Thank you very much for what you're doing here. I'll start off by saying I'm opposed to this 1% across the board local option tax for many reasons, but many things that have been going on lately is like we have a housing problem. We have a lack of housing, and it's getting more and more expensive to build houses. This is going to affect the building materials for building houses. This is going to affect the cost of replacing the windows in somebody's house for energy efficiency. They're going to be charged 1% on their materials, not the labor, but the materials. Investors are going to have to look at this extra cost when they come to our town to do something. I mean, I think this goes deeper than what we're seeing on the surface, besides going and buying an auto part, for example. This could get into some major significant things. I was in the modular home business for almost 25 years. The modular home companies pay directly to the state of Vermont the sales tax on the materials after the house is delivered. I never collected the sales tax. So how is that going to be handled as far as that was delivered in the town of Hartford? So I think there's some other things going on here. That being said, one of the biggest problems I have is we have a high tax bill, of course. Everybody wants to deal with that. Our grand list seems to not be growing as rapidly as what I drive around and see happen in our town, with $1 million homes being built. Not always. Commercial buildings being built. I know some have done in the TIF district, which makes a difference, but are we really collecting the taxes we should on the properties out there, and are they appraised properly? I understand the reappraisal going around, the town appraisal is not covering the entire town. It's only covering a small amount of it. Why don't we invest in a full appraisal and start collecting the tax dollars that we should be collecting on the values of homes? Maybe I'm not paying my fair share. I don't know. I haven't tried to sell my house to know what it's worth, but I just think this is the wrong approach. Tim Fiore said it very nicely. Our grand list is here, but the growth is not what I see when I drive around town. So I think we need to figure out a way to cut cost or get other revenues besides a retail sales tax that's going to discourage people from Hartford, not encourage. And I thank you for your time. I know it's frustrating, and glad I'm not in your seat right now. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Mike. Can anybody speak quickly to the appraisal, Mike's appraisal question?
There's a town-wide reassessment underway, and the town has gotten approval from the state regulators about the methodology being used. I know that between actual inspections and sophisticated algorithms and AI and experienced personnel and interaction with the state regulators, the town feels very confident that we're going to have a good result that will capture the true values. Of course, they've all changed dramatically in the past 5 or 6 years. COVID had a tremendous impact, and we're hopefully going to catch up with that impact, both to bring equity among all properties in town so that like properties are assessed in a like manner, but also to adjust the balance of grand list items between residential properties and commercial properties. Residential properties have truly skyrocketed in value, and the assessment should reflect that, will reflect it, and it will no doubt result in actually lower rates, because if you account for the fact that there's a more valuable property, that property will have lower rates to achieve the same amount of property tax revenue.
And just to clarify, John, that new grand list is not going to be in effect for this budget, right?
It will be in effect for setting of tax rates, which happens in July
Okay,
every year.
great. Okay, we have a few more minutes to go here on this topic. Has anybody not had a chance to speak who would like to? Anybody else online?
No other hands up at the moment?
Okay, anybody want to return? Yes, Eric.
Thank you. Eric Krause, Town of Hartford again. I'll be much more brief this time. Since Brattleboro was brought up, they assessed the sales tax, I believe, in 2019. Just correct me if I have that wrong. January 2nd, 2025, just a few weeks ago, there's an article in VT Digger that I'll quote from. Quote, in Brattleboro, the Select Board is considering a $3 million list of potential cuts after discovering the town's $25 million base budget would spark an estimated 22% tax increase. I bring that into the conversation just because obviously this isn't a panacea, and it's certainly not a long-term solution, which brings me back to my earlier comments about let's think this through and make sure it's the right solution. That's really, if you summarize what I said earlier, I'm not saying this is the wrong one. This is the wrong tool in the toolbox, but I'm not sure it's the right one. I'm not sure we know the answer yet. And that turned out to be the case in Killington. And this caught my attention. Rarely do you see a tax rescinded. Seems like an unheard of thing, but Killington rescinded this. They assessed the tax in 2008, along with rooms and meals, I believe. And in 2018, they rescinded it. And the reason was because the resort realized that they were paying a lot, and that 1% was adding up to a lot of money. And so they went to the town and said, hey, is there a different way we could solve your problem or your delta between revenues and expenditures? And they worked out a private public partnership, essentially, that involves the resort or some association that was created, paying for event hosting and marketing and some other things that the resort is really good at that the town maybe didn't have the capacity for, didn't want to pay for, couldn't pay for. So I wonder, on that, Hartford is nothing like Killington. So I don't think that particular solution applies, but it made me think that, or maybe ask the question, what has the town of Hartford explored in terms of other options for revenue, and looking creatively at this, for example, at things like private public partnerships to solve some of our fiscal woes. The question that I do have, and maybe one of the folks online can answer this, there's also a $6 per filing fee. So everyone that collects the tax files with the state, and they have to provide, there's a $6 filing fee. I was wondering whose share of the pie that comes out of and what that might amount to in the town of Hartford, given
$5.96 per filer, I gather. But that's a perfect question for the Department of Taxes.
Yeah, go ahead,
Thank you.
Jen.
Thanks, Eric.
This is Sharon. I can answer that. The filing fee is actually deducted from the revenue that's paid to the town, and it is actually deducted 70% from the town receipts and 30% from the pilot fund. So it's broken down in the same way that the revenue is broken down.
Okay, great. Thanks. Okay, Paul, you're going to have the last word here on this.
Okay. Yeah, Paul Sunny again, still from Hausler. Eric's point took up my brain, something that I had been wondering about, which is the idea of putting the tax in with a sunset provision. There's this thought that we don't know, and one way to maybe learn more is to experiment. And I think sometimes that's done at the federal level. And I think it's an opportunity to put something in, see what the impact is, and then make another decision several years down the road. Leave it at that. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Paul.
Can I have one more quick thing?
Yep.
In the materials that are on the town website relating to this, there's also a link to a Vermont Public, I think it's like a Vermont Edition episode where they explore the pros and cons of local option tax, including, and they do interview the Manchester, Vermont town manager, and they were the first town to implement the local option sales tax in 1999. And then they talked to a few other municipalities as well, but it was a very valuable experience. And if you have the 20 minutes, I recommend listening to it.
Great. Okay, we're going to conclude this part of the meeting. So if you have additional questions and comments on this topic, you know who you select board members are, and you should contact them, and this conversation can continue at select board meetings. And then in addition, at town meeting day, there'll be an opportunity to, of course, discuss this as well on the Saturday. So it won't be part of budget and candidates night, since it's not going to be part of the budget or the candidates. But once again, we will convene as a town on Saturday the 1st, and we can talk about this again. Great. So we're going to move into part 2 of tonight's session. We have 2 of our department chairs here to talk about the other 3 of our department chairs here. Thank you.
And one online.
And
as well.
virtually there's a 4th.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got majority of the town staff is standing by. So just to shift here, this is now moving to the other local option tax. So if you're at home and confused, we've been talking about a general sales tax, and now we're going to be talking about the rooms, meals, and alcohol tax that the town has been levying for, I guess, 6 or 8 years at this point.
5 or 6 anyway.
Yeah. As part of that, the money that is collected goes into its own fund, and then the voters need to vote how they want to use that money. And so we have a proposal on how to use some of those receipts from this year. So are you guys ready to roll, or do you want a minute to?
Okay.
Fantastic. Okay. Yeah.
Oh, good evening. As what was just previously mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit about the existing local options tax and some requested purchases. I'm just going to start it off just briefly in the presentation. You'll see. Okay, let's go this way. Okay, all right. Sorry about that. The current town charter identifies the existing local options tax. And later on in the presentation, you'll see the dollar amount that happens to be there for voter approved purchases. But this is what's in the charter already, which allows the town to collect the rooms and meals tax, and then also allows the town to put purchases in front of the voters for them to vote yay or nay on particular purchases. So the lot article vehicle package is what it's called, is right here on your screen. It's asking the town to authorize the expenditure of $442,000 of the current existing local options tax, which there is a balance of, and we'll go over that later, for 3 vehicle purchases, or 3 packages of vehicles and some other equipment. So I'm just going to talk about number 1, and then I'm going to pass it over to Bryan from the Public Works Department, and then the police chief will pop on, I believe, to talk about number 3. But part of the purchase is a request for the voters to approve in the Parks and Recreation Department, which is the department that I manage, a 4-wheel drive heavy duty pickup truck with a utility flatbed and lift gate to replace a 2011 pickup truck. And B, a park grounds utility vehicle. Or existing unit that we have is called a Gator,
with electric cargo dump to replace a 2014 particular unit. So we're asking for the voters to consider $87,000 part of this package to purchase these two pieces of equipment for us. So just want to briefly, again, just kind of show you, we wanted to give you some existing conditions and then also show you kind of what we're looking at as far as a purchase. Existing conditions of the vehicle that we'll be replacing is a 2011 two-wheel drive pickup truck. When this was purchased, it was just utilized for about 6 months out of the year and then parked for the winter time. We use this vehicle, you know, all the time now. So, but it's tired. It's got some severe rust on the truck, as well as the rocker panels and bed cross members. It's got about 75,000 miles on this unit, and this is the truck that we'd like to replace. Some images of the condition of the vehicle. This is what we'd like to purchase. Is out of the potentially approved by the voter local options tax is a new pickup truck, either current 2025 or 2026 four-wheel drive, 3/4 ton crew cab with a flatbed, side aluminum toolboxes and trays and lift gate, and a push plate assembly for a plow. This will replace the 2011 for our park maintenance personnel for the park system. We're also looking to replace, as mentioned before, 2014 four-wheel drive John Deere Gator. This particular unit is specifically out of Maxfield Sports Complex, but we do occasionally use it for events and other park locations on occasion. Current unit is something that is, you know, operating about 6 months out of the year, and then it's parked. We do have some mechanical issues with the engine. There's a transmission disengage issue that is identified that it just needs to be, the whole unit needs to be replaced. We'll be accessing, using the equipment, and it just pops out of gear on a regular basis. The dump body doesn't function appropriately. So we're looking to replace this tired piece of equipment out at Maxfield with a new Toro Workman is what we're looking at, which is an image of this particular unit right here. And it would, oops, it would replace the Gator. It's a 2025 or 2026 four-wheel drive utility vehicle with the same type of bed, canopy, windshield for protection, you know, turf tires so it can be utilized on the park system, and about a 1-ton cargo capacity to move material around to different parts of the park, as well as moving equipment and attachments that we currently have, which would be utilized on this piece of equipment. So that kind of reviews the Parks and Recreation portion of this, and I'll turn this over to the Public Works Director for his conversation about what he's looking at. So,
good evening.
You want me to move these for you?
No, yeah, if you
okay, all right.
So the first one, if you want to just move down to, is we're looking to replace, we call it H8. This truck was actually scheduled to be replaced in this year's budget, but with a couple of other vehicles that we had other issues with, we pushed this one off a year. So this is a 2017 International. It's a plow dump truck. Yes, years wise, it's not that old, but you can see by the use that it gets, the rust in the body. This vehicle has, if I put in there, it's got almost 3,700 engine hours. When you take a look at diesel engines, that's more of a bigger component of what you take a look at than actual mileage, is how many hours are on the engine. But this truck has been very expensive for us to keep, with almost over $52,000 in recorded repairs for that. So this is one of our primary plow trucks. that we have on the road. So this is in the summertime, it's used for hauling material and whatnot. And in the wintertime, at this time of the year, it is one of our primary plow trucks. And this is keeping in line. We have 2 other trucks ordered this year. So this is keeping in line with the modernization of our fleet and making sure that we have good plow trucks and dump trucks on the road. To replace it, if we go down, so the cost of this vehicle with plow is around $210,000. And what we're looking to get is a 2026 or newer 6-wheel dump, which this is an example of it. Lead time for vehicles at this are anywhere from 8 to 12 months. So even though if this passes, we probably won't see the truck until sometime next year by the time we actually get it for that. So that's why it's imperative that we try to stay ahead of the game and not wait until the very end, until the truck is broken and down and we don't have a plow truck utilized for that. So the next one we're looking for, this is our utility truck. This is what we call the mechanic's truck. This is a 2011. It's a 4-wheel drive. It has a flatbed on it. The aluminum flatbed on it right now is the 2nd generation of that. The other one rusted out. It's just, as Scott had put it, this truck's tired too. It's just what we're looking to do is we have a newer vehicle equipment mechanic, and what we're going to look to do to this truck is make it a mobile work truck, and to make it to where he can respond out to, instead of lifting a truck rack that's broken and trying to get it back to the garage, that we could go out and actually start doing more repairs out in the field, and also provide support to a couple of remote facilities, the White River Junction, a wastewater treatment plant, and the Cooney treatment plant. So if they have an issue with the truck there, we could go respond to it at that time with this vehicle. We're looking to fit it with mobile toolboxes, and we're looking, hopefully, in other portions of the budget, we can outfit this with electronic or impact wrenches, so that we can get away and start doing a lot of the repairs out in the field that need to be done. This is an example. Once again, it's a 2026 or newer 4-wheel drive. We're still going back and forth whether we need a 3/4 or a 1-ton with it. And also too, it also would support a new diesel fuel tank. We do remote fueling for like the excavator and the grader, and also for the front end loader that's down at the transfer station. And we're really just looking to maximize the work we can get and how we can do more stuff out in the field. And it's just a utility truck that we would need for that. So, and that is for our last example. What that is, Chief Sheldon on the line.
I am. Can you
Go
hear me?
ahead, you're on.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Chief Sheldon, and I'm sorry I couldn't be there tonight. I had some stuff going on at home, but I want to talk to you tonight about the police cruiser replacement. Typically, we replace 1 police cruiser every year out of the budget. The cost is about $75,000 to replace and outfit one of our cruisers. When I say cruisers, it would be not a typical what you would see a cruiser we had in the past. These are Chevy Tahoe police intercept vehicles. The one we're looking to replace is a 2022 Ford Explorer intercept utility vehicle, our PD5. For us, it's got some high mileage, about 71,000 miles, and it's starting to build up some maintenance costs. Not an exorbitant amount of maintenance costs, about $9,000, but when you consider our yearly budget for maintenance is only about 40 to 45. It does take some of our maintenance costs for a more percentage-wise, a higher rate of repair cost than the average. So then you look at the history of this one vehicle we're looking to replace, and it's been involved in 2 collisions during its service life. So really, we try to replace 1 a year right now. I would like to see more, but I understand these aren't cheap vehicles. And 1 a year means that our patrol fleet, every 5 years, a car is replaced. When you consider these cars run 24/7, 5 years is a long time. I don't have engine hours, tell you how long they idle for and run for, but all I have tonight is the mileage for you, which is about 71,000. Considering what these cars go through, these vehicles go through every year, in their 5-year life expectancy in the patrol division, it's imperative that we replace these vehicles for the safety of our responding officers who are using these for high-speed pursuits, high-speed responses, in all kinds of weather and road conditions. We, as an added note, when we replace a vehicle, And when we take one vehicle offline, we repurpose it for our admin staff or our detectives or our canine, and most of that is either through contracts or command staff vehicles. So we repurpose these and we drive them until the maintenance cost gets too high, and then we have to get rid of them. So when we say we're buying a new cruiser to replace an old one, we keep the old one. As long as we can, put it into a non-response role, a non-emergency role, we maintain them in our fleet. If we need it, if we don't need it, then we can certainly trade it in or sell it. But currently, we have been keeping them and repurposing them into our admin or detective or canine fleets. So we're looking to replace a patrol vehicle. Due to the high cost, due to the maintenance on it, due to the fact it's been in a couple accidents. But again, this is a yearly thing. We try to replace one a year to keep the patrol vehicles. The oldest one in our fleet should be 5 years old. If we do that, which is going to average about 100 to 125,000 miles in the 5-year time period, which is a lot of mileage when these things run just about every single day, 365 days, 24 hours a day. This is a lot of wear and tear on these cars for 5 years. So we just try to keep a rotation, one a year, to maintain that 5-year rotation within our patrol fleet. So these guys have, and these girls have, great cars to drive that are safe and that are roadworthy. So we're looking at replacing the 2022 with a 2026 Chevy Tahoe Police Intercept vehicle. They're larger, and they fit more equipment. And with all the equipment we're starting to carry more and more, it's imperative that we have more room inside of these vehicles. They also have higher payloads and higher towing capacity in case we need to do something with them. And again, I'm looking for 75,000.
Great, thanks, Chief.
As Scott will point out, we're listing there the history of the use of the local rooms, meals and alcohol tax, the lot. And you can see that we generally are collecting about $360,000 a year. We currently have on balance, I believe it's $503,000. And therefore, the $442,000 that is being requested in this package of replacement vehicles is well within that amount that we already have on account. I will point out that my recollection is that during the budget process, as we were trying to hack away and present as small an increase as possible over last year, we looked to go to this lot that's already in the bank as a means to buy some of this important capital equipment. So that's why it's before you and will be before you on town meeting day.
Do we want to continue ahead? Chief Cooney, do you want to?
I'd be happy to.
Sure, you want me to do that, and then we can take questions.
Yep.
As a
I'll just
package.
take it first.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, what you just saw previously was a ballot item that was going to address a large vehicle purchase. This one will be a separate standalone ballot item recommending the use of existing local option taxes to spend on the replacement of vehicle rescue tools used by the fire department. What you'll see on the ballot is the town authorized the expenditure of $58,000 of local option tax revenue already in hand from the rooms, meals, and alcohol taxes towards the purchase of vehicle rescue tools, which are commonly referred to as the jaws of life, for the Hartford Fire Department. What we are looking to replace is a 2008 gas and hydraulic tool system. It's currently 16 years old. It's run by gas and hydraulic hoses that uses pressurized hydraulic fluid to operate the equipment. It's an outdated system. It is antiquated based on current standards. It gives us limited mobility because it's attached by hoses directly to the vehicle. So you can only reach as far as the vehicle's parked to where we might be utilizing this equipment to extricate individuals from vehicles or other heavy equipment. Uses gasoline and hydraulic fluid. And we know that the hose system needs to be replaced in both the vehicle and the portable unit. And it has definitely served its useful life within the department. How will this equipment be paid for? Again, we're talking about existing local option tax revenue that is currently existing on account. We're looking to expend $58,000 from that account towards the replacement of 3 battery operated rescue tools that include a cutter, a spreader, and a hydraulic and a ram. I shouldn't say hydraulic because it's not hydraulically powered anymore. These are current tools used. The department does own sets of these currently. Their spreading and cutting force is at a higher level than the older hydraulic tools that we have on the rescue. And once again, the amount requested does fit in line with what is currently available in a balance in the local option tax account to include the vehicle purchases. And then that's all I have.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so just for everybody doing the math, there's 503,000 and change on account now. And if you add the vehicle proposal and the Jaws of Life proposal, that's 500.
Okay, so do we have questions for our department heads on this item? Or actually, as Chief Cooney pointed out, there will be 2 separate ballot items, both addressed to the single fund.
Chief, can you stop sharing your screen?
Yes, I can.
And there is one.
Yes, Tim, approach the mic again.
I think all these presentations are excellent. I think these are very reasonable and needed purchases in our community. My only concern from a long-term basis is that, future select boards sort of rethink how we kind of come to this point, because yes, the LOT fund is there and it's great. I think it's a appropriate use. One question or one idea I'm intrigued by is that because if indeed the other tax passes, why we wouldn't necessarily just nest the 2 tax collection components, and maybe that's a hassle with the charter or whatever, where they just go to the bottom line. Because I just feel like this is somewhat cumbersome to constantly have to have you guys come in and do a mother may I. You're all reasonable, excellent leaders that are requesting perfectly reasonable things for the community. It just seems like it would be easier to drive that through the budget process and put it as a bundle, and then take all the LOT and strip that off on the bottom. So that's one thought. The other thing that I've never really understood, and perhaps Gail, if she was here, could explain it, but year after year, we have this comment about the unassigned fund balance. And my understanding of it from a fiscal standpoint is that when a town doesn't use money, that money's kind of goes to the next fiscal. And then it's always been a little odd to me as a voter and a taxpayer, because it seems like you vote on a budget of this is what you think you'll spend. And I realize through the year that doesn't play out that way. But it just seems like the way we were using the unassigned fund balance right now is we're sort of like every year we're like, oh my God, like the tax rate's high. So let's take more of that unassigned fund balance and bring it over here to get that rate back down. And I just think we should rethink both the expense side, planning side, and the revenue side in a more coherent fashion. So, as a quick example, if we know we're replacing police cruisers on a regular cycle, they should be setting a capital reserve aside to just buy those cruisers, and it should be embedded within their budget, as opposed to like sort of oh my God, we got some money, let's buy that. And I'm not suggesting that's happening here. I'm just saying like maybe better fiscal planning about our equipment in the town and so on. So thank you.
John, you want to speak to that capital planning at all? Or
I've got a big amen for Tim Farrell on several of his comments. Yes, capital planning and improvement of our capital improvement plan is warranted. We went out with an RFP, got no proposals. We're going to go out with another RFP, try to do it again with a consultant who can help us create some kind of an orderly process to prioritize and then budget, so that we don't have to play mother may I. I agree with you on that. Yes, the charter is clunky. Yes, that's the way we ask the voters to make use of funds that have been collected through the rooms, meal, and alcohol tax. Maybe it's an item that could be addressed in a future charter revision. I certainly support that idea, and I'm sure the board might have some people on it that agree with you that it's a little bit clunky. But I think what I'd like to characterize tonight about is property tax relief. The board has had two difficult cycles. These are the two cycles I've been involved with, so maybe they've always been difficult. But it's been two difficult cycles where the town wants to maintain and, dare I say it, improve services, but not kill the taxpayer. We all heard loud and clear the taxpayers last year with larger increases than we've seen, especially on the school side, but our increase was substantial too. And I think that the board members have made it clear through their deliberations over these last several months that we want to do everything we can. We want to look under every stone to find creative ways, innovative ways to reduce the property tax burden on people in town. And you might not like every way that they've proposed it. One of them is a local option sales tax. And now we're making use tonight of our existing local option tax on rooms, meal, and alcohol. But it's all with a mind toward making purchases and making investments on needed things to maintain and improve services without sticking it on the property tax. That's my summary.
Okay. Questions, comments, anybody in the room for our department heads or the town manager about this collection of items? Anybody online, Kim? Yeah,
Hand up.
great.
Oh, two hands up, no? Excuse me, Mike Morris, go ahead.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, Mike Morris, Hartford. Yes, I understand we need to get safety equipment. Things get old, antiquated. But I have a problem with some of the vehicles, and I'm going to give an example. It's not to pick on a department, it's just to pick on general maintenance of our town vehicles. Take the recreation department, I think it's an F-150, the yellow one, showing all the rust and everything else. I believe back in 2015 or 16, Leo Puller was the manager at the time, and we acquired the materials to undercoat our vehicles to make them last longer. That's a common thing here in Vermont. If you grew up here in Vermont, oil undercoating was a biggie because we were oiling the roads and the dirt roads back in the day, and that's how you get your car undercoated at some time. But anyways, that F-150 being parked for the winter, meaning it's not being driven in the salt, was pretty rotted out. Tells me it was never undercoated, taken care of, or maintained properly. That's not the department's fault because they're not supposed to be vehicle maintenance personnel. They're not trained for that. But I think we need to find a way to take better care of our equipment. Like I said, back in 2015 or 16, we were going to oil undercoat, or not oil undercoat, but some sort of undercoating to protect our vehicles in all departments. I have yet to see any of our vehicles, police cruisers, responders vehicles, anybody that has any of the vehicles in the town of Hartford have any type of undercoating, and I don't understand why. I just traded a 2012 F-250 that had a plow on it, was driven in every winter, did not have one spot of rust on it because it got rinsed off and undercoated at least once a year. That basically, as far as the undercarriage goes, no rot. It pays, even if we contract it out. So if we're going to go forward with taking care of vehicles, I'd like to see a maintenance program of some sort that I thought we started back, like I said, 2015, 16, somewhere in there. Just a little input on, we got to take care of what we have. 75,000 miles on a vehicle nowadays is nothing. I guess that explains myself. So if we could be looking into that in the future to cut costs, that's a biggie in our town. Is I think we need to cut cost, and if it means cutting some services, then so be it. It's getting too expensive for the average person to move here and do things. Again,
Okay.
for your time.
Yep, thanks, Mike. Yeah, Scott, you want to speak to the maintenance?
Yeah, I just want to clarify, Mike, that one of your points, and maybe I misspoke. The vehicle, when it was purchased, my understanding was the two-wheel vehicle was purchased. It was a 6-month utilized piece of equipment. And probably within the past 10 years, it turned into used year round. So it did receive some salt. I can't answer the undercoating piece back then, but I can tell you the new plow truck that we bought a couple years ago, we undercoated with an application every year.
Other questions? Anybody online? Yeah, go ahead, Kim, ask them.
Heidi, go ahead.
Good evening. Heidi Due to White River Junction, Vermont. I have a question to all of the department heads. Are all of the lot proposal purchases this year absolutely necessary, or can any of them be put off one more year?
Department heads?
Let's put it this way, Heidi. All of these lot items were originally proposed in the general fund budget. And it was determined that while they're necessary, we had this alternative funding source, again, to provide some property tax relief. All these department heads presented these proposals to the finance director and myself and made compelling arguments as to why they were needed, but they can speak for themselves.
Heidi, as far as the rescue tools are concerned, yeah, the 16 years is over the lifespan already by 6 years, the 10-year lifespan typically. So if not replaced, I will take that unit out of service.
Yeah, and Heidi, thank you for the question. I wouldn't present to the town manager or the finance office if we didn't have a need for the replacement of the equipment. And we did put it in the operating budget for that purpose. It's also part of our capital improvement plan for vehicles. So I don't have it right in front of me, but this particular truck, I believe, was about 3 or 4 years past its life cycle for us to replace the piece of equipment and keep it in service. So I wouldn't present something if I didn't feel like it was necessary.
Heidi, for the DPW trucks, like I mentioned earlier, H8 was supposed to have been replaced in this year's budget, but we pushed it off for a year because we had 2 other vehicles, some 1-tons that needed to be replaced. So it's like I say, it's a primary plow truck, and just the cost of maintaining it is getting above and beyond what is really reasonable. And we always try to look at our traded value that we can potentially get for that. And the longer we hold these vehicles, the less we're getting trade-in value. And that goes for the mechanics trucks too. It's just tired. It's showing a lot of mechanical issues. So we could put money into maintenance, or we can just get a newer truck that will just, go give us another 10 years. That'll be more maintenance free for that.
Chief Sheldon, yeah, are you still with us? Want to answer Heidi's question?
I am, and yes, I do. Outside of echoing what the other department heads have said, speaking with our fleet manager, current fleet manager at the police station, we have been replacing vehicles prior to my arrival, 2 a year, sometimes more. So we're down to 1 a year, and that's really the bare minimum because again, it's 5 years before one vehicle in the patrol division gets replaced in the one vehicle purchased a year cycle. So we've cut way back to 1 a year. Which is my understanding, far less than what we used to order every year. So yeah, I think 1 a year is the bare minimum we can do to sustain a safe fleet for the patrol division. So yeah, I don't think there's an option here, and it was in our budget. It's been in our budget since I've been there the last couple of years to buy 1 a year. So it's just a way of trying to find another way to pay for these and reduce the budget overall to help the taxpayers.
Thank you all for giving your feedback. I have a couple more questions, if I may, that are related to this. Chief Sheldon, how many cruisers do we have at this time?
Patrol cruisers, we have 5.
We only have 5?
Yes.
So if I heard you correctly, you said that this vehicle is a 2022 with 75-ish thousand, and you were
71. Yep.
Okay, you were contemplating keeping it for a fleet vehicle for the for the police department?
For admin, we would take the lettering off the sides and use it for an admin or a detective car, which generally does not do high-speed pursuits or fast responses to emergencies. So it wouldn't have, we would maintain it, but it wouldn't be in the fleet where we would be worried about it having a mechanical problem during a high-speed driving route.
Okay. What do we do with the admin vehicles? Do we use those as trade-in towards a new cruiser?
We have, my understanding is we have. I haven't had to do that yet since I've been there. But they can either be traded in or they can be sold outright.
Okay. I don't mean to hound you, but
no.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't we purchase another additional cruiser with ARPA funding?
We did. That was replacing one. Because again, we used to do, from what I am being told by the current fleet manager, we used to do several a year. So we were behind. We had one that was involved in an accident and that was totaled out. So we had to replace some vehicles fairly quickly when I first got hired, and we used ARPA money for that, yes.
So we do utilize our insurance if we have an accident, correct, to replace?
Yeah. We do. It doesn't always replace everything. Equipment
Gotcha.
that's inside is still or broken. I know, and I might be a little off on my facts here, but I know we were going to trade one vehicle in, and it got in an accident and was totaled out, so we lost some trade-in value on that. That was right before I got here in 23. So, yeah, we currently maintain 5 patrol vehicles, and then the rest are detectives and admin cars.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification, and thank you all for all of your answers back to my questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Heidi. Okay, gentlemen, approach the microphone.
Yes, hello. Brandon Smith, live in Hartford. I'm also a member of the select board here. I just wanted to thank the gentleman who gave that comment a couple minutes ago about vehicle maintenance, undercoating. I'm a big proponent for that, and I hope that the town manager will help us institute a more regular program for that. And also, I just wanted to bring up that there are things that you can buy. I've been tempted to buy them myself, where it's like a strip that shoots water up, almost like you have your own car wash underneath the car to get the salt off more regularly than the once a year undercoating. So that may be an option. It sounds kind of kooky, but it might save us some money. And I think that's all I had. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Brandon.
Hello there, I'm Linda Miller from Hartford. So I have a question for the police chief. When you say that some of the vehicles become administrative vehicles, does that increase the size of our total vehicles for the department then? And which then means we have more maintenance on more vehicles rather than having some of the vehicles go, like you said, a trade-in or outright sale?
Generally, the vehicles we have our fleet stays the same. We did increase by 1 when we restructured and added another divisional commander's position for outreach. But generally the fleet stays roughly the same. Now, what will happen sometimes is when we go back, or we have rebuilt our detective division. We've had to, because of the increase in detectives, with our staffing levels going up, we've been able to increase our detectives, which means we also have to purchase vehicles by contract for some of those detectives for take-home cars. So overall, our fleet shouldn't be back to where it was probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, but it shouldn't grow past that. You got admin cars for the command staff, and then you have your detectives and K9. And some of that is contractual obligations that we don't have any control over. But to answer your question, no, our fleet size won't really grow much more than it is.
Thank you.
Comments?
No other hands up at the moment.
Any additional questions, comments in the room? Take another swing at it, Tim.
Just one other thought. And again, I appreciate all this work. I think it's perfectly reasonable stuff for the community. Before I came to this meeting, I looked up the history of my particular home here in Hartford. And in 2008, I spent $2,800 on school tax, $1,550 on town. So the total tax bill was $4,350. This past year, it was $8,500, an increase of 94%. God, I wish my salary did that, but it didn't. But I'm only bringing this up because if I may, related back to this concept of the CLA and the appraisal, I really think that we should, as a town, be putting in place a new mechanism that allows this to never happen again. Because we have one of the lowest CLAs in the state right now, 66%, I believe. And yes, it's not pertinent to what we're discussing tonight, but it is pertinent to the tax bill. And the reality is that I think voters' stomach for spending money for the town or the school would go way up if we would get to CLA things sorted out. And I'm hoping, and I plan to go to the school board meetings to ask them if the CLA was where it should be, how many more millions of dollars would be coming into the town of Hartford, offsetting all of our taxes, because it is a big number. And we could spend much less time worrying about jaws of life, with all due respect, and worrying about that CLA and keeping that thing up. So thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Okay, I think that may bring us to the natural conclusion of our activities here tonight. So thank you, everybody in the room, for coming down. Thank you, everybody online, for being part of this. Once again, this was the first of 4 events, and we will reconvene for our next event, which will be Monday, February 24th, to talk about our candidates and budget. And we'll see you then. Thanks.
Thanks, Chuck.
Thanks, Kim. So I feel badly for you going, oh my God, that could be me. I know.